Hello everyone, and welcome to this in-depth video about Brian Wilson, the legendary American musician and co-founder of the Beach Boys. In today's video, we'll explore Brian Wilson's full biography from his early life and family background through his groundbreaking music career to his personal life and later years. We'll talk about his parents and siblings, his education and rise to fame with the Beach Boys, as well as his relationships, marriages, and children. Finally, we'll look at the health challenges he faced, with emphasis on his illness and his death in June 2025, and wrap up with details about his lifestyle, net worth, homes, and even what we could find about the cars he owned. Before we dive in, if you enjoyed detailed life and career biographies, please like this video, share it with fellow music fans, leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great content. Now, let's begin our journey through the fascinating life of Brian Wilson. Let's start from the beginning. Brian Wilson's early life and family background. Brian Douglas Wilson was born on June 20th, 1942, at Centinela Hospital Medical Center in Inglewood, California. He was the first child of Audrey Neva Cordhoff and Murray Gage Wilson. Shortly after Brian's birth, the Wilson family moved to a house in Hawthorne, California, where Brian grew up. His two younger brothers, Dennis, born 1944, and Carl, born 1946, joined the family in Hawthorne shortly after. Brian was notably the eldest of the brothers who would all become founding members of the Beach Boys. From an early age, Brian displayed remarkable musical talent. His family remembered that even as an infant, he could mimic melodies he heard on the radio. By age 7 or 8, he was performing solos in his church choir, and his director noted that he had perfect pitch. Brian also taught himself to play piano obsessively after the family acquired an upright piano when he was 12. In addition to music, he was active in school. He played quarterback for Hawthorne High's football team and also ran cross country and played baseball during high school. These early experiences, growing up in suburban California, playing sports, and nurturing a natural gift for harmony and composition, set the stage for Brian Wilson's future in music. Brian's parents were both musically inclined. His mother, Audrey Neva Cordhoff Wilson, was a pianist and organist. Although she never pursued a professional music career, Audrey instilled a love of music in her children and encouraged their musical interests. A 1997 obituary notes that Audrey watched proudly as her sons Dennis, Carl, and Brian became founding members of the Beach Boys. His father, Murray Gage Wilson, was by trade a machinist who ran the family business, Able Machinery, but he also had musical ambitions. Murray wrote or co-wrote dozens of songs over his lifetime. In fact, by Brian's teens, Murray was actively nurturing his son's talents. He became the Beach Boys' first manager and co-founded their early record label, Safari Records, and he produced some of their first recordings. As a young man, Brian had 6 weeks of accordion lessons arranged by Murray, and by age 15, Brian was busy experimenting with recording techniques on his own. However, Brian's relationship with his father was complicated. The Wilson brothers later described Murray as a strict and sometimes harsh disciplinarian. Brian's own 2016 memoir even characterizes his father as violent and cruel, suggesting Brian and his siblings endured verbal and occasional physical maltreatment at home. This tension was a significant part of Brian's upbringing. Nevertheless, Murray Wilson did help cultivate his children's musical abilities, singing harmony parts with them and teaching them to appreciate different styles of music. Tragically, both of Brian's brothers died young. Dennis Wilson drowned in a boating accident in December 1983 at age 39. An obituary notes that at the time Dennis was also remembered for introducing the surfing theme to the Beach Boys music. Carl Wilson died of lung cancer in February 1998 at age 51. The Los Angeles Times reports that Carl passed away in Los Angeles with his family by his side, and that his voice had been a defining part of many Beach Boys songs. Brian Wilson also had half-siblings through his father's later marriages. For example, Murray married Carol Winfield in 1964, but these family members are less well-known and did not play a role in the Beach Boys story. In addition to his brothers, Brian was close to his cousin Mike Love, co-lead vocalist of the Beach Boys, and childhood friend Al Jardine, who also joined the band. But strictly speaking, his biological siblings were Dennis and Carl, both of whom shared musical gifts, but unfortunately passed away decades ago. Brian Wilson attended Hawthorne High School in Hawthorne, California. In high school, he was an athlete, quarterback of the football team, a baseball player, and a cross-country runner. But music was his real passion. He spent long hours practicing piano and deconstructing harmonies from his favorite records in the family's basement, using a portable tape recorder he received for his 16th birthday. After graduating from high school in 1960, Brian enrolled at El Camino College in Los Angeles, majoring in psychology while also pursuing music studies. However, he found academic life frustrating, especially when professors dismissed popular music as worthy of study. According to interviews, Wilson withdrew from college after about 18 months. He later said he had been working on his own music in college, even composing what he called his first original melody, Surfer Girl, during that time. Ultimately, Wilson never finished a college degree. Instead, his talents and ambition pulled him into the music business full-time. Brian Wilson's music career began in his teenage years. In 1961, at Hawthorne High, Brian and his brothers Dennis and Carl formed a new band with friends Mike Love and Al Jardine. They initially called themselves the Pendletons, a reference to the Pendleton wool shirts popular with surfers at the time. Brian co-wrote the band's first original song, Surfin', with Mike Love at Dennis's suggestion. Their father Murray became the group's manager. The Pendletons recorded Surfin' on the small Candix Records label, and it quickly became a regional hit in Los Angeles. It even reached number 75 on the national Billboard chart. After this early success, Candix Records decided to change the band's name to the Beach Boys, and that name stuck. The Beach Boys made their first big public appearance on New Year's Eve 1961 at a high school dance, and Surfin' had built enough buzz that they were gaining attention. Around late 1961 and early 1962, Brian started working with songwriter Gary Usher to expand their sound. When Candix ran into financial trouble, Murray canceled the contract, but Brian and Gary recorded new demos of songs like 409 and Surfin' Safari. These demos were sent to Capitol Records, which agreed to sign the Beach Boys. When Capitol released those demos as a single in 1962, the band finally achieved their first double-sided national hit. This was essentially the official debut of the Beach Boys on Capitol, marking the true start of their professional recording career. Thus, Brian's early career from 1961 to 1962 was defined by forming the Beach Boys, releasing Surfin', and landing a record deal. He took on the role of chief songwriter, producer, and creative leader even at this young age. These successes set the stage for the Beach Boys to become a major force in pop music. Brian Wilson's professional career with the Beach Boys truly took off in the early 1960s. As the group's primary composer and producer, he helped create a string of hit records that defined the California surf sound. By the mid-1960s, he had written or co-written more than 24 U.S. top 40 hits for the band. Some of the Beach Boys' biggest early hits include Surf City, 1963, I Get Around, 1964, Help Me, Rhonda, 1965, and the groundbreaking Good Vibrations, 1966. Each of these songs showcased Wilson's knack for catchy melodies and lush vocal harmonies, setting new standards in pop music production. In 1964, at the height of their success, Brian withdrew from active touring with the Beach Boys to concentrate on songwriting and recording. According to accounts, this was partly due to growing stress and a nervous breakdown. Instead of performing on the road, he began focusing all his energy in the recording studio. This change allowed him to experiment extensively with arranging and production techniques, an approach that was quite new for rock groups at the time. It was during this period that Brian crafted the Beach Boys' album Pet Sounds, 1966, which he produced, arranged, and nearly single-handedly composed. Pet Sounds is now regarded as one of the greatest and most influential albums in pop music history. Brian and lyricist Tony Asher assembled an incredible team of session musicians, later known as the Wrecking Crew, to record the album's complex tracks in various studios. The songs featured sophisticated harmonies and unconventional instruments, like theremin, bicycle bells, and French horns, combined with introspective, poetic lyrics. Contemporary descriptions note that Pet Sounds was promoted at the time as the most progressive pop album ever, and it indeed set a new bar for studio production. Brian later said his goal was to create the greatest rock album, inspired by the Beatles' Rubber Soul, and he blended elements of jazz, classical, and psychedelic pop into the Beach Boys sound. Following Pet Sounds, Brian embarked on the ambitious, but ultimately unfinished, Smile project, often called a teenage symphony to God. However, various pressures caused the project to collapse, and its material wasn't released until decades later. Pet Sounds and the Smile sessions have since become legendary in rock history, reinforcing Wilson's reputation as a studio innovator. By the late 1960s, Brian's mental and physical health had begun to decline under the weight of pressure, leading to periods of seclusion, insomnia, and substance abuse. He stayed with the Beach Boys in name, but was often unable or unwilling to produce new music. The band's first album with him listed as sole producer wasn't until The Beach Boys' Love You in 1977, which was almost entirely Brian's work. In the 1980s, after a period of little output, Brian formed a controversial partnership with his psychologist Eugene Landy, who took an unusual and controlling role in Brian's life and career. Under Landy's supervision, Wilson released a solo album titled Brian Wilson in 1988. This album contains several co-written songs and won Wilson his first significant solo success. Brian officially broke away from Landy in 1991, regaining control of his music and business. After decades focused on studio work, Brian returned to live performance starting in 1999. He began touring regularly as a solo artist, performing Beach Boys hits and solo material with his own touring band. From 1999 all the way up through 2022, he remained a touring musician, delighting audiences around the world with faithful reproductions of classic Beach Boys albums, sometimes even staging orchestral tours of Pet Sounds. In recognition of his contributions, Brian Wilson was honored with multiple awards and honors. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988 as a member of the Beach Boys, and later into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2000. He earned 9 Grammy Award nominations over his career and won 2 Grammys: Best Rock Instrumental Performance in 2005 and Best Historical Album in 2013. These accolades reflect his status as a pioneering and influential music creator. Overall, Brian Wilson's professional career spanned from the early 1960s surf music craze through the dawn of studio-driven rock and beyond. He wrote and produced some of the era's most beloved songs, reshaped the possibilities of pop production on Pet Sounds, and later became a solo artist in his own right. His work influenced countless artists across genres, and he is often cited as an important figure in the development of modern pop and rock music. Personal life. Brian Wilson's personal life was marked by both triumph and turmoil. In terms of personality, he was known to be introverted and reflective. Colleagues often noted his shy and gentle nature offstage, in contrast to the exuberant surf party image of the band. Brian also had a passion for nostalgic and intricate music. In his youth, he idolized vocal groups like the Four Freshmen, and he remained a fan of Baroque pop and jazz influences. Wilson's life was heavily impacted by mental health struggles. He suffered multiple nervous breakdowns in the mid to late 1960s and was later diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and manic depression. He has spoken about experiencing chronic auditory hallucinations, hearing voices all day, as part of his illness. These conditions led to periods of seclusion and erratic behavior, affecting his relationships and work. He also battled substance abuse and weight issues in the 1970s and 1980s. Through it all, music remained a constant solace. He once remarked that religion and music were intertwined for him, saying in 1966 that all music starts with religion, even as he remained personally unorthodox about faith. Brian's story was famously dramatized in the 2014 biographical film Love and Mercy, which portrayed both his creative peak and his personal struggles. In real life, he often credited close family members, especially his second wife Melinda, with helping him manage his challenges. For instance, he once said that Melinda was more than my wife. She was my savior for providing stability and support during difficult times. In later years, especially during the 2000s and 2010s, Wilson led a relatively low-key lifestyle. He mostly stayed out of the tabloids and spent time with family. In 2024, Reports noted that his Beverly Hills home was impeccably maintained, reflecting a quiet life under care. A court report from 2024 described Wilson as living there with two of his daughters and a longtime live-in caregiver. Even as his body aged, he remained mentally aware of his surroundings, though he needed a walker to move around. Despite his withdrawal from the public eye, Brian remained mentally engaged with music into his later years. He would sometimes consult with collaborators on recording projects and look forward to legacy concerts or reissues of his classic work. He also took pleasure in family gatherings. For example, his daughters Carney and Wendy mentioned that they would occasionally perform with their father, as they had all grown up deeply involved in music. Brian Wilson's family life included 2 marriages and 7 children. His first wife was singer Marilyn Rovell, whom he married in 1964. Marilyn was a member of the girl group The Honeys and is credited on some Beach Boys recordings. Together, Brian and Marilyn had 2 daughters, Carney, born 1968, and Wendy, born 1969. Carney and Wendy grew up in the spotlight to some degree. In fact, they co-founded the pop group Wilson Phillips with Chynna Phillips in 1989 and achieved their own success in the early 1990s. Carney married musician Robert Bonfiglio and has 2 daughters, while Wendy married Daniel Knudsen and has 4 sons. This makes Brian a grandfather to several grandchildren. Brian and Marilyn divorced in 1979 after 15 years of marriage. They remained on relatively friendly terms, and Marilyn continued to be involved in his life for years afterward. Later, Brian married Melinda Ledbetter in 1995. Melinda had been a car saleswoman who became Brian's legal client and then romantic partner. She played a crucial role in managing his comeback and stabilizing his life. Over nearly 3 decades of marriage, Brian and Melinda adopted 5 children together: Dakota Rose, Daria Rose, Delaney Rose, Dylan Wilson, and Dash Wilson. All 5 carry the Wilson surname. 2 of the daughters have Rose as a middle name. By many accounts, Melinda and Brian chose to adopt rather than have biological children. Brian was 48 by the time of their marriage, and the couple reportedly did not have any other biological children. Their adopted children were often kept out of the public eye, though family photos and occasional interviews confirmed their close bonds. In January 2024, Brian publicly announced the death of Melinda at age 77. Her passing was a significant blow to Brian. He called her more than my wife, she was my savior, and said her death left him and their children just in tears. Melinda's death was one of the final chapters in Brian's life story. Sickness and death. Brian Wilson's later years were marked by significant health challenges, both mental and physical. As noted earlier, he had a long history of mental illness. In the mid-1960s, he suffered a serious nervous breakdown, and decades of depression, anxiety, and psychosis followed. He was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, a condition involving both mood disorders and schizophrenia symptoms, and manic depression, and he reported experiencing persistent auditory hallucinations. During the 1970s and 1980s, these illnesses contributed to periods of reclusiveness, substance abuse, and weight gain. Brian also had physical health issues. Over the years, he struggled with obesity and later diabetes. In his early 80s, walking became difficult for him. By 2024, court records described him as needing a walker and full-time care. His cardiologist and doctors were monitoring multiple problems, including dementia. In early 2024, public documents and news reports revealed that Brian Wilson was suffering from major neurocognitive disorder, dementia. His wife had died just weeks earlier, and it was determined by his care team that Brian could no longer manage his affairs. A judge in Los Angeles placed him under a conservatorship in May 2024. Court papers described him as needing medication for dementia and unable to care for himself without assistance. Reports indicated he had episodes of confusion related to age and illness. By this time, Brian was 81 years old. On June 11, 2025, Brian Wilson died at age 82. The specific cause of death was not detailed in official statements, but given his recent health history, it is understood to have been related to his long-standing medical issues. His death was confirmed by his family and reported in the media. At the time of his death, he left behind his daughters, Carney and Wendy, his 5 adopted children from his marriage with Melinda, and their grandchildren. At the time of his death in 2025, Brian Wilson was estimated to have a net worth of about $100 million. This reflects decades of success as a songwriter, performer, and producer. A large portion of his wealth came from royalties on Beach Boys hits and songwriting income. For example, Wilson co-wrote many #1 songs, and royalty streams from those classics have been significant over the years. Brian Wilson owned several notable properties during his life. Most famously, in the 1960s, he purchased a hillside mansion on Laurel Way in Beverly Hills, 1448 Laurel Way. This became the family home for Brian, Marilyn, and their daughters after their marriage. It was in that Beverly Hills house that Brian wrote and recorded much of Pet Sounds. In later years, Brian sold this house, but during the 1990s and 2000s he acquired another Beverly Hills estate. According to property records, in 1999 Wilson paid about $3.5 million for a mansion in Beverly Hills. He listed that house for nearly $9 million in 2007, though it eventually sold later or was taken off the market. In 2012, Brian and Melinda purchased a second home at Lake Arrowhead, California, paying about $2.1 million. This was a large mountain property where they spent occasional weekends and holidays. They listed the Lake Arrowhead home for sale in 2016 for around $3.3 million and ultimately sold it in late 2019 for about $2.85 million. According to legal filings and interviews, Brian's main residence in his final years remained in Beverly Hills. His daughters and caregiver reported that he lived in a well-maintained home on a quiet street, surrounded by gardens. In addition, Brian had at times owned other California homes. In the late 1970s, during a particularly troubled period, he actually moved out of the Beverly Hills mansion into a more modest house on Sunset Boulevard. He also rented a home in Santa Monica briefly. By the early 1980s, he purchased a home in Pacific Palisades, West Los Angeles, which became one of his family homes. Thank you for watching this comprehensive biography of Brian Wilson. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up, share it with fellow music history fans, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth artist profiles. Feel free to leave your thoughts or memories of Brian Wilson in the comments below. His music has touched so many lives.